Okay, 3.23 is around the corner. There is amazing opportunities to sustain flasks in at least 2 of the 3, but since one of them is build your own, I guess 3 of the 3 ascendancies that we get access to. Flask sustain means that unique flasks become more interesting, and we can do some interesting things with that. We also can increase the effect of unique flasks, much more so than we recently have been able to, although probably in Trial of the Ancestors there were some dumb things you could do. So yeah, first up, Dying Sun. This used to be the gold standard of flasks. It got very expensive, lots of less duration, but with the insane amount of flask charges we can get now, the 20% increased area of effect is incredible, scales very well with flask effect, and firing 2 additional projectiles is just, that stat is amazing. That's really hard to achieve. There's 2 additional projectiles on the 3 total, and only for bow attacks. So this adds projectiles to spells as well. It is a very, very powerful flask effect, and if it's adjacent to your tincture, then you might be able to very well sustain this flask going forward. It's still relatively popular. 12% of people in Ancestors were using it, and that's probably the most popular one we'll be talking about. Adzeris Promise. Adzeris Promise is another one of these flasks. It's unique. It's relatively hard to sustain. Right? It's 35 charges over 6.5 seconds, which becomes relatively trivial to sustain on some of these ascendancies. So we gain 5 to 8% of elemental damage as extra chaos damage. This scales. 5 to 8% of physical damage is extra chaos damage. This scales. The new gems offer some very interesting opportunities for conversion of elements, of course. So we'll see a lot of things happening there. What's more interesting to see is that this thing gives you 2% of chaos damage leeches life. This stat is not easy to come by. And there's some hit-based chaos skills that have come out as well with these new changes. Adzeris Promise is only used by 5% of people. It really has fallen off. It also got nerfed into the ground. But I think it's going to see a resurgence. Now, if we look... Oh god, I need to make this bigger. If we look at the best item I can find in Standard, it's been there for a while considering it's being sold for Exalts, it is 0.62% of chaos damage leeches life. That's the highest value I was able to find. It's an S0, it has the quality, it has everything else on it. This is about as good as it's going to get, right? That flask's baseline does triple the amount. And we have instant leech available these days as well. This is going to allow for interesting opportunities. Probably not to the point where you can instant leech back all the damage you take from a Forbidden Rite, but probably not too far off either. Might be possible. Next up, Vessel of Vinctar. This flask is also expensive to sustain. It has 20 to 50 charges. It consumes 20 or 50 charges, but that's then increased by 125 to 150%. So this pretty much eats the entire flask at once, but the benefits you get and the drawback are amazing. It creates a shock for nearby enemies for 10%. This is not scaled. I don't think that unless these numbers are white, it's not being scaled. You are shocked, causing 50% increased damage taken. This you'll have to work around, but you can use it to your benefit if you're creative. You also get a mod that gives you either damage conversion to lightning from physical, or added damage to attacks, or added damage to spells, and an insane 20% of lightning damage leeches as life. Like we just looked at the chaos damage leeches life, and 2% was triple the best mod you could buy in standard. This is much higher than that. In general, this flask is very rarely used. 0.7% of people are using it. The best mod we can find in standard is 1.08%. This is a prefix plus suffix plus quality. And that flask's baseline before flask effect is about 20 times as good. That means that you just hit the leech cap. Or that means you have to do way less damage to hit the leech cap. Right? For instant leech as well, the 20% of lightning damage leeches life is just an absolute insane amount. The 20% of the damage mods, so let's talk about how good those are. If we are looking at, was it Warlord? Lightning damage if you dealt a critical strike recently. This goes up, if it's elevated, from 1 to 61 to 90. Now, this can't be scaled with flask effect, but that still means that this damage mod of 15 to 65 at a high roll, or 10 to 55 at a low roll, is roughly the amount that an elevated damage mod would give you. And this has, well, they both have a conditional aspect to it. So these numbers are actually pretty good if you compare it to what it would cost you to find this on the tree. This 20%, I mean, it's just ridiculously high, but it does allow you to have very small hits recover you a lot of life with instant leech. So frequent small hits, that's a way to sustain cast from damage taken loops and things like that as well. Again, not easy to do the uptime on, but it's doable as a Pathfinder with a little bit of investment. And I think that any class that wants to keep this up is going to be able to keep it up during fights. You might not be able to do it, in hideout, but you'll probably get 100% uptime of this during your mapping. Okay, there is a neat interaction you can use. There is a protection mastery that says damaging ailments cannot be inflicted on you while you already have one. People use this with self-poison to just get like one small poison stack and then be ignite immune. You can also, if you reduce the effect of your shock enough that you're comfortable with it, since this flask shocks you, it can make you immune to all the other non-damaging ailments. Right, so you can actually, in a way, use that flask combined with like a flask that has reduced effect of shock and get to the point where you are comfortable being immune to non-damaging ailment with this protection mastery. Protection masteries have a high opportunity cost, right? They're not the sexiest wheels. Some of them are actually pretty good, but a number of them are not that exciting, so that's something to keep in mind. But this is a way to get ailment immunity if you are using a Vessel of Vinctar. The Vessel of Vinctar is hard to acquire. I believe it only drops from Vinctar Square, and that requires that you have like a set of 4 uniques to get your Vinctar Square via trade and recipe. So could be quite the expensive flask in next league. Next up, Cynder Swallow Urn.